Are you ready to feel more energized, focused, and supported? Go to layeredsuperfood.com and add nourishing, plant based foods to fuel you from sunrise to sunset. Use our promo code Dr. D at checkout to save 15% off your purchase today. You know, throughout the years, I've been taking more time to improve my overall health and well being in numerous ways. Health encompasses a variety of factors, and I just like to explore different ways to improve my health. Liquid IV is one of the ways I'm doing that. Liquid IV is a category winning hydration brand fueling well being. I really like the convenient packaging and variety of flavors. Liquid IV also believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code Dr. D at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Dr. D at liquidiv.com. All right, we are back, Dr. D's social network, here with Liz Entin. Liz, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic. We got a hell of a show for you today. I mean, as Liz said before we got on, she did not see her life going this way. And we have to see what way that actually is for that. So thank you for being on.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, it's almost an understatement. I did not see this going this way. So,
Right. So let's get some background first, because I think in order to tell this story and have a good
Mhm.
discussion about it, we have to not kind of know the previous version of your life related to this and get an idea just about you and your life, um, and let the listeners understand kind of the genesis of this.
Do I go into what I'm working on
Yeah,
first
go into
or
what you're
do I?
working on and
Sorry.
then how like things were before this whole.
Okay. So, I have a company. It's called WTF Just Happened. Am I allowed to swear? Am I allowed to
Yeah, of
say
course,
the?
please. Yeah,
Okay.
whatever you want to
So,
say.
So, what the fuck just happened? And the book is WTF Just Happened? A sciencey-skeptic explores grief, healing, and evidence of an afterlife. And I also have a podcast, which is WTF Just Happened, all about the afterlife, no woo. And then also we'll host private dinners or brunches about these topics. So this is not how I saw my life going. I consider myself a really rational person. I was raised culturally Jewish. Actually, my mom's Protestant, my dad was Jewish. So a little bit more meshed in Jewish culture, but celebrated all the holidays, but no religion, raised atheist in a very atheist culture or very material culture. I don't know if everyone was an atheist, just to the point where anything like spirituality was just completely irrelevant to my life. It was just never thought of, never mentioned, and it just wasn't it just wasn't even on my radar. And I was working, I guess would say fairly normal job. I was working in fashion. I was working as a stylist for fashion magazines, and I had my own company as well that covered originally we were covering fashion weeks around the world, and at this point we were selling emerging fashion designers from around the world. And I was also doing consulting for other startups. So you could say just I just I guess that's pretty normal. Maybe not as normal as accounting, but nevertheless, like normal.
Normal as
So
accounting. I like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, pretty normal. And sadly, in 2015, my dad passed away, and I just had a thought. My very first thought was so much of science fiction tends to come true. Is there any chance you could time travel? And we could do something to transport him to 2000 years down the line when medicine's different. It wasn't one of those logical, it wasn't like
Yeah.
as much as something to look into as let me talk to doctors. I mean, the more realistic thing I was looking into, and I can never pronounce this, it's like cryogenics, where you
Uh-huh. Yeah,
freeze
cryogenics,
the
yeah.
yeah, where you freeze the brain and body. So when medicine's better, I looked into that, but I would have done that, but my mom said he would not have been okay with that, so it wasn't really. I didn't have the legal right to do that, nor would I have disrespected my parents like that and their wishes. But I thought this about time travel, and I just decided to Google and look into that because if people were doing that, we wouldn't really know, most likely.
Yeah.
And I found out, yeah, you can time travel. It's not doable, but in theory, time is not this linear thing that as we experience it. Essentially, if we could build a rocket ship that could travel almost at the speed of light, I'm going to have the exact figures wrong, but I'm going to have the concept correct. Let's say 5 years passed for the person traveling at
Yeah.
close to the speed of light, like 30 years would have passed for people on Earth.
Right, time
So,
dilation. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I hadn't really known that. And that was just so amazing. So I was reading more and more about physics, like quantum entanglement, where two particles at opposite ends of the universe seem able to somehow communicate with each other. I mean, that's a
Right.
whole long story. So then I just started to think, well, what else that everything that I've taken for granted, that time works a certain way, information is communicated certain ways, could what else are there not the same limits on that I always assumed there were? And my very first thought was, okay, so, and this is what I thought at the time, our consciousness is created by neurons firing in our brain. And that happened once to create me. Why could this not happen again in, say, 300 years? I wouldn't be me again. I'd be a different person. My dad would be a different person, but we'd somehow get to live more than one life based on a type of reincarnation that didn't have the whole spiritual karma component. It just purely scientific based on the dumb luck of neurons firing. And that wouldn't be as good as the thought of getting to be with my dad again or know him or be
Yeah.
myself again. But it's certainly better than complete annihilation. And my very next thought to that was, is there any possibility, if this is true, that any of this consciousness carried over? And I Googled that, and that's where everything changed, because that's where I started to find this absolutely life changing body of research and researchers studying exactly that question.
That's fantastic. So let's go down that road. So what were your initial thoughts once you started really digging into the research related to afterlife, and how did that compete with your previous ideas about afterlife?
Oh my God. I mean, my first thought was like, what the absolute fuck? Like the very first, like the very first person I found when I did that research were two people, were doctors Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson. And Ian Stevenson has since passed away. And Dr. Tucker's taken over his research, and they are professors at the University of Virginia, child psychiatrists, and they study cases of kids with past life memories through this whole department called the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia that studies psychic mediumship, studies near death experiences. So I started to read Dr. Jim Tucker. I was like, there's got to be a catch. Like, he must be doing fascinating research, but I'm sure they say this is just inexplicable research, and we're pretty sure the answer is not going to be past lives, or, I mean, really, the word is reincarnation, though I personally, that word doesn't resonate with me because it's just so spiritual. But it's the word that people understand. So I just, my first, yeah, as I said, my first thought was absolutely what the fuck. Like, that's what I kept thinking as I went further. But I also kept thinking, there's got to be a catch. Like, there's something I'm missing. There's something that we're going to discover that explains this. And I assumed the research was kind of flimsy. And the further and further I went, the stronger and stronger it was. And I was just I mean, this was the 100% opposite of what I'd ever assumed. It's just made no sense to me. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm also, it did align with the fact I consider myself an evidence based person and I trust science. And when researchers are getting this data, they're, I can't say I thought, well, there's no denying it, but I was intrigued enough that I was like, I've got to go further with this.
So what was the so I'm curious, what was the initial um research findings that started to turn your wheels on this? Like what was the specific information that you were like, okay, this is different?
So the very first with Doctors Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson is they found cases of kids who had specific memories of past lives. I'll give the example of James Leininger because that's one of the strongest cases. It was a young boy who remembered being a World War II pilot. And the parents, he was under 5 years old. He was probably like 2 or 3, and he was having nightmares every night and panics where he'd be screaming and little man on fire, plane go down, little man on fire. And his parents were baffled. They couldn't figure it out. And eventually, to make a very, very long, in depth, amazing story fairly short, his father suddenly thought maybe could this possibly be a past life, something that family did not believe in. And he found Dr. Jim Tucker, and this kid knew all this stuff. He knew stuff about airplanes. Dr. Tucker said the way he would play, also he played out like plane crashes, and he played in the way that children who've witnessed a trauma play. And all his responses were the same as a child in this life who witnessed a trauma. Let's say a child witnessed a murder or an accident.
Yeah.
And then it was more extreme. Like it led to where he met his old Air Force buddies. They matched him up with a person who'd passed away in the way the child remembered. He met with his old Air Force buddies. He met with his previous sister, who was now, I believe, in her 90s, and they all
Mhm.
shared memories. And they, the child also had these little dolls, these little like Air Force dolls or Army dolls, and they each had different color hair. And he named each one, I don't know, let's say he called like one with like red hair Tom and one with like black hair Eric. I don't think I have the names right, but those matched up with hair colors of men who'd been in the Air Force who'd passed away. And he
Yeah.
said, well, I named these dolls those men because they're the ones who greeted me when I crossed to the other side. Or I believe he used the word heaven because he was in a Christian family. That was the
Yeah.
word he understood. So just,
It
yeah,
it
it's
just
just
pulled at
unbelievable.
you. You started really the wheels started turning and you had to explore more. And where did that
Yeah.
exploration lead you to after that?
Well, after reading, and that was just one case. Both of the doctors had a lot of cases that checked out, and these just factually checked out. And this led me just further and further. I began to find other researchers. I found, as well as I mentioned, the group at the Division of Perceptual Studies, such as Dr. Bruce Grayson, who was studying cases of kids with past life memories. Dr. Sam Parnia also was studying um, oh, Dr. Bruce Grayson studying near death experiences, Dr. Sam Parnia studying near death experiences, and these were they were had cases that were verified. These were scientists and doctors and very logical minded, and they were believing this, or yeah, I guess believing because they had inexplicable backed up experiences the way
Right.
Dr. Tucker's case of James Leininger was backed up. I found Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell. I found her research, and she's um, studying, working with children with autism who have remarkable psychic abilities. She also had done some research on mediumship and psi abilities, and she was a medical doctor who had studied at Johns Hopkins and Harvard. I mean, this was the type of people getting this data. And then when I heard about psychic mediums, I was like, well, I can't think of anything I considered more just nonsense until, I mean, there's no way. I was like, what? That is the biggest. Those are like those people have the little crystal shops and tell you. I mean, it's either a trick or it's entertainment, at a party or a magic show, which, there's no problem if it's entertainment as long as they're honest about it. So that's what I thought that was. I was like, oh, there's no way. But I also found um, this this woman, Dr. Julie Beischel, and then her husband, Mark Bacuzzi, and they had a foundation. They started a research center called the Windbridge Research Center and the Windbridge Institute. It has two divisions. And they were studying psychic mediums under strict controls. They were doing up to quintuple blinded studies where mediums were expected to get highly accurate information, where they were speaking on the phone with a person and the person wasn't even the sitter. Who the sitter is the person who sits with a medium who's lost their deceased loved one. This was a person who was taking the information. So the sitter didn't know the information. All the medium had was the first name of a deceased person, was giving it to this blinded researcher, a proxy sitter on the phone. And they were supposed to get specific information like relationship to the sitter, um, memories, jobs, hobbies, personality traits. And some of these mediums were getting highly specific, accurate information. And I was like, that's batshit. Like, there's no way. I've got to see this for myself. So that was kind of, I guess, where I was at and where I got to the next level of starting to look into this a little myself.
Yeah. So at what level did you get to where you started to believe fully in an afterlife and different things?
Okay, well, where I'm at now, you mean? Or
Sure. Yeah, what was the tipping point for you?
okay, well, I don't believe fully. I think there is a
Okay.
preponderance of evidence that there is something absolutely inexplicable with how we understand physics to be now, and that these people are genuinely doing what they say they're doing. Can I guarantee that's an afterlife? I think it's the most likely explanation. Could physics come along and come up with an explanation for all of this and it's not an afterlife? Totally possible. I just think based on everything I've learned as of now, this seems to be the most likely explanation. Um, and what was my tipping point? That's so hard to say because it was just a buildup of one thing after another. I think getting to meet the people, I started to volunteer after reading about Dr. Julie Beischel. I found this finding Windbridge. I decided I'd get a medium reading myself. And I went down the list. I found the first one who was in New York where I was at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get a reading with her. I want it in New York because I want it to be in person
Right.
because I want to watch what she's doing and see if she's cheating. Is she Googling? So I booked a reading and then I was like, well, this is nuts. I'm not even going to do this. And then I decided to reach out to Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell and just see if she suggested any mediums. And I was expecting to get back, well, there is really interesting research, but it's inconclusive. It's worth discussing further. We can't really back up mediumship. That's what I was expecting. Instead, she gave me a name, and it was the same woman. Her name's Laura Lynn Jackson, who I'd reached out to at Windbridge. And I was like, okay, that's okay. I'm going to do this. So I booked a reading, but she has an incredibly long wait list. So I was like, wow, it's going to be years of waiting. And she's the one I trust because now she's verified by two scientists. So she also held events. And at the same time, I got the name randomly of this other psychic medium, not verified by science, just like through a friend of a friend of a friend, just this very unexpected way. I didn't really know people who knew this stuff. So I was like, well, I'll just go to this woman. I expect nothing. I went to this woman, like everything hidden, disguised. This one was in person. Oh my God, this woman knew stuff she could not have known. And at the same time, I went to and I'm not giving the name of the first woman only because she doesn't market. She just was doing this for a little while and she's not doing it anymore. So there's, she, I know, isn't really giving her name out for readings, but the other one, Laura Lynn Jackson, had workshops. So I'm like, well, let me go to one of her workshops and classes. And I was like, okay, she seems really normal. And I had that same reaction with the first woman I went to. I was like, she's just really normal. And she absolutely knew stuff she could not have known. I mean, not only did I have so much hidden, she couldn't Google me. She knew, even if she had, say, like facial recognition technology, and this was 2016 at the time, like facial recognition technology is not what it is today. It's made tremendous advances in the past few years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even if she had, like, the stuff she knew about me like would not have been Googleable through facial recognition technology and or voice recognition. And so I was amazed by that. And I went and got a few other readings, and some were not so good. But when I went to Laura's workshop, I was amazed by how normal she was. And I was like, I've got to figure out what's going on. I still was like, there's most likely a catch that I'm not seeing, or I just, it could not align. So I messaged Laura and I was like, well, do you know of any organizations similar to Windbridge? But Windbridge is located in Arizona. I was like, do you know of any in New York or Los Angeles? Because I spent time in both cities that are doing the same type of research. And I guess that's where would be a huge turning point, because she said, check this organization, the Forever Family Foundation. They are grief focused, but they have a, Wimbridge is mainly research focused, but they do grief retreats and conventions, and they have a scientific advisory board with people like Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell on it, Dr. Jim Tucker, all these, many of them like Harvard educated. I mean, highly educated in science. Members who are members of the scientific advisory board. Plus, they certify a group of psychic mediums also under very tight controls where they don't know who the person is they're reading, although they do give the readings directly to the sitters, unlike with Winbridge where it's quintuple blinded, but they know nothing and they're expected to get very accurate information. And so they had this group of certified mediums and they focused a lot on research. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try to volunteer for them because that's probably how I'll find the catch and what's going on. And, it ended up being the complete opposite. And the founders of it, Fran and Bob Ginsberg, sadly, Fran passed away, but they became mentors of mine. And especially Bob was like me, very skeptical. It took him like years, and he shared so many of his stories about what changed his mind. And I'd say meeting them was kind of the door that opened the point to turning point after turning point after turning point.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing this because it's a couple of observations. One, you're willing to do something a lot of people who are skeptical will not do, which is actually do the work and look into it. So many people are skeptical, just push off things and go, no, I'm not into it, type of thing. So I want to applaud you because that's curiosity. That's part of being a human, is having curiosity and to further explore things that you maybe just don't really are not into or don't believe in, but to actually do the work for that. So I want to applaud you for that, because I think there's a lot of courage in that. Because the thing about it is, if you're hold so strong to something, what if it's not what you want it to be? And there's a break in reality for people when that happens usually. But you just seem to be very like, I'm just going to keep pushing down the road and see where this leads, which makes me think about this next question, which is, are you looking for a definitive answer, or are you looking to just gain information that just helps you have at least an answer for right now?
Ideally, I would like a definitive answer. I don't think that's possible. This is the hardest question in the universe. I mean, there's actually two researchers who are studying this, Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose, and they've worked with Stephen Hawking. I mean, Stephen Hawking doesn't have the full answer to this. I mean, I don't think of like Stephen Hawking and like Dr. Lisa Randall, who studies string theory, and Dr. Brian Greene, like the smartest scientists in the world, don't have a definitive answer. Although a lot of them conclude there is no afterlife, but maybe often afterlife is presented in such a package, sort of religion based, not necessarily believe. I mean, I want to respect anyone's belief, but not necessarily with any scientific basis. But yeah, if those people don't have a definitive answer, I highly doubt I'm going to get a definitive answer. But so I'm settling for just thinking that this is one of the biggest mysteries of the universe, and some of the information is just so remarkably fascinating.
It's
How can I stop it beyond? Yeah.
I
I mean,
have also through documentaries and things. I think that's the pull too. It's just I've seen so much; it's so compelling. Now, also, I'm also coming from a very different lens than you are. I grew up in a very spiritual household and still maintain that. It's been very comforting for me, but I don't like all the bullshit around it either. So I have kind of a unique perspective in that, but I always appreciate people being willing to explore different aspects. But it makes me also think about the next thing. What are the implications if you came to what are the implications? Let's do a hypothetical here, for the world. What's the implications if an afterlife is proven to be true, unequivocally true for humanity?
Oh my god. I mean, it so many levels. I mean, let's take people different people in different ways. I think first of all, for people like me or people maybe even more atheist where they're like there's zero chance and they would never even look at it, to people who are like maybe it would really alleviate a certain level of terror and suffering, terror of
Mm,
our own mortality, terror of loss of others. I mean, you still grieve. Like, I definitely had a misconception that if I got a certain level of evidence, I would never grieve again. Or that I was very like jealous of psychic mediums when I first began to see there seemed to be something to this, because I was like, they must never feel grief. But that's not true. They grieve as hard as the rest
of
of
course.
us. Yeah. And so I think it would really alleviate terror of our own mortality. It might end a way we approach death, because I think there is um a way in medicine where it's like prolong the life, prolong the life, prolong the
Right.
life. I mean, where
Right.
people are just in a bed suffering and pain, not even communicative, and they might live that way for 5 years. That's horrible. I would not want to be kept in that state. And I think
Yeah.
there might be a piece, the way we often do with animals, of ending their life
Right.
when there's no possibility of a quality of life. And I think then in terms of, and I really want to be careful towing the line of this because I am not religious, so I don't want to
Sure.
disrespect religion. And it does wonderful things for many people, but it's also done some, and still does some horrible, horrible
Most
things. Taking,
definitely.
yeah, like
You can't
taking
be religious and
away,
not have that be that's a true statement. It's not like anything
yeah,
else is just a denial. Coming from someone who's had that in his life, his
Mm.
entire life, and made that choice. It is completely true what you're
Yeah,
saying. So
yeah, okay, good. I
it's
don't want to,
completely true. I mean, to deny
yeah.
that is just it's a fallacy. It just
I
is.
mean, it's taking away women's rights. It's taking away
Of
rights of people
course.
to trying to take away rights of people to marry who love each other. I mean, when used, I guess like anything else, it can be abused. I
Of
mean,
course. Of course.
I was watching a documentary, Shiny Happy People. It encourages
Oh,
like
I just
beating and
watched that.
spanking children.
I literally
Yeah,
just watched that, and I was
it's
like, with the Duggar
horrible.
family, and it's crazy.
Yes,
My wife and
it's
I, it's so batshit
horrible.
crazy, actually.
So batshit
It's
crazy.
batshit
Yes,
crazy, and even like
batshit crazy. And
this Southern Baptists, a section of Christianity, Southern Baptists are banning women from being pastors. This is
yep,
2023. What is
this
this? The
is
Dark Ages? I mean, it's like
2023.
right there's again as someone who has been in this my whole life, I take
Huh.
offense to all these things. Again, these are the bullshit aspects of it that have nothing to do
Right.
with salvation or comfort and all. They just have
No.
they're steeped in racism and misogyny and holding people back. That's not what that's
Mhm.
about. That's garbage, but it's
Completely.
complete garbage, right?
And
I'm
like,
just gonna say it. It's like,
okay, good. Yeah. Then I am like, what
right,
they've done with Roe and our Supreme Court. They're trying to not
sure,
let people marry. They're trying to not let people be in the body of the gender they identify with, which
most
interestingly, Dr.
definitely.
Jim Tucker has done a little bit of research. And
Mm.
often those are people who were other genders in previous lives that maybe ended too
Mm.
quickly. So it'd be like if
Mm.
suddenly I woke
Yeah.
up as a man and like I wouldn't want that. I'd be
Right.
like, oh no, like
Right.
I'm a woman, so it just, yeah. So
Yeah.
I still think there are people who would keep those sects and deny it's true, because I mean there's there's scientific facts that a small group of people still deny, like the flat earthers, but I don't think it would
Yeah.
have this type. It would just, the more scientific truths we have, the better the world is, and this type of this type of abusing religion to control others and manipulate others would not have the same
Right.
level of power that it does
Yeah.
today, is my guess of what all this would do. I think the only negative I could see, because everything has a negative associated with
Sure.
it, is
Yeah.
there might be more apathy among certain people for fighting through struggles, and they've just been like, who cares,
Mm,
this is one of many lives, I'm not gonna like
right.
try
just
to succeed
just
at
move
this
on.
thing. Or
Yeah.
yeah,
Just like
yeah, I mean, I hope instincts are strong enough that it would not lead to more suicides. I mean, that would just be
yeah.
horrifying, but I don't think it so much as that. I think overall instincts are strong enough in the majority of people to that it wouldn't increase the level, but I do think it, in the negative, it could increase
Sure.
apathy. But I think overall it would have a significantly more positive effect than a negative effect. As I
Yeah.
think just knowing the truth does, and scientific truth, the more we get, life improves.
There's a good movie with like you said, like sci-fi. Often I'm into that too, because
Mm.
if you go back, I mean, I'm an 80s kid. You go back and you see all the technology from the 80s and movies, and then the 90s. Most of that has actually been true for that. And so I love movies, how they do that. And there's a movie, and it came out not that long ago, but it's literally about what you're talking about, that humanity has proven that there's an afterlife. It's with Robert Redford and I think Jason Sudeikis, or a different guy.
Oh,
And it's really good. But in that, they posit that essentially once humanity knows that, humans go into a massive form of chaos, and a lot of people commit suicide because they just, a lot of people who didn't believe in it just can't imagine. They like, they just, it like destroys their brain. Like they just can't, like they take a negative stance to it. Let's just put it that way. Whereas you're saying
yeah.
it's more positive. I'd like to tend to believe it'd be more positive, because then people would, the fear of dying would be a lot less for people. I think there's a lot of fear of dying is not knowing what's going to happen, because humans want to, I think inherently humans want to believe like this can't be it for me. Like this is like, especially if it was terrible for you, like there's got to be something better for me, like
Right. I agree. I would think even if you had a terrible life, if you're like, well, there's a very difference between being, it would be more like, well, I had a terrible year versus everything's going to be
right.
terrible permanently. If you're just like, well, this is this. And if we could understand, that uh, this is just a struggle, and if
Yeah.
this is a especially tough life, you just have to get through it. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel instead of just this and then there's nothing.
Yeah.
I also think the concept of hell, I can't imagine, like, again, I wasn't raised around any of that, but I got to meet some people as I got older who came from religious
Yeah.
fundamentalism and using the
Yeah.
trauma of hell against children. It
Ah,
just seems like it's a trauma. I can't fathom the level of
yeah.
terror that people must feel thinking that's a possibility or a probable or a definite.
Yeah. It's I don't think it does any favors for people. And it is, and again, from being in this background and having very positive experiences, those are not my experiences with that. Those are controlling experiences. And they're, again, they separate you from the comfort and the connection and the good feeling and the overwhelming positive nature. But a lot of this is human stuff, that people put walls up to create control of other people. I know what people wear, uh, the things they're part of, the sexual relations, all these things. People are generally the problem about this stuff. And so I think that it was interesting that this is coming from a very scientific point of view here, because I'm of the firm belief that these things can have spiritual things, can have very scientific things, and actually a lot of really famous scientists in our past, including like Galileo, were spiritual people, and they also had a very scientific mind for things as well. So I think we should all be working together on these things and just get rid of the bullshit aspects and stuff. It's like that's just hurting people. I mean, why would you care about someone's sex in relation to their salvation, or who they choose to be with? It's literally irrelevant. It's literally irrelevant. It's like you do you, enjoy it. It's crazy to me.
I just can't even begin to understand why someone else cares about that. It's unfathomable to me. Like
I know.
I
Yeah.
can't imagine.
Yeah. So but I think the afterlife is such a great conversation where I wanted to talk to you because I like that you're willing to push deeply on this into it. And it also is a story about someone who lost their parent, one of their parents,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the search and the emotion of that really, I think, is a central part of this story too.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is.
I'm sure you miss your dad quite a bit.
Oh my God, so much. Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard. I guess it's one of the universal things we all have to go through. And it's what the I would say one of the hardest parts of being a human.
What do you miss the most about your dad?
Oh my God. I think there's just oh, so much. Well, first of all, I think there's always a sense of safety of knowing that you have these two people there. And now I'm an only child, so now like
Yeah,
my core family is reduced by 50%. We're not especially close with our extended family,
yeah,
so it's just like these, parent, if they're a good parent, will do anything for their child. It's like the child, they love you in a way no one else does. You come
yeah,
first. It's an unbreakable bond. Yes, I mean there are some people who are estranged from their parents, but nevertheless, divorce is more common than that.
yeah,
More common than children estranged from their parents, as far as I know. So you can be absolutely in love in a marriage, but it doesn't have the same level of guarantee security. And you're more equals. Like you can't sort of fuck up the same way you can with a parent. And you know what I mean?
yeah,
And like you can just not that I want to hurt the people who love me, but nevertheless, I could just fuck up I think a lot more with my parents than I ever would like ever have with like any of my boyfriends or ever think I would one day with a husband. Not yeah, again, not that I want to, but nevertheless you can. And I just miss his personality. Like he was really funny, really like had this sort of radiating warmth. Um, in all honesty, it could be difficult. We would have some intense fights, but overall, like, yeah, amazing sense of humor and yeah, just sort of like this unending support, like supporting my
yeah,
dreams, not, pushing me. And I think the direction a lot of parents do, at least after school, being, a lot of parents are like, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, or, work on Wall Street, something that's considered very safe. Not that those aren't wonderful
yeah,
careers, you know, but not pushing me to the safe direction. And I mean, I think even if I had done any of those, I wouldn't have done them in the safe way. Like if I was a doctor, I probably would have done like Doctors Without Borders. If I was a lawyer, I would
yeah,
have fought for
yeah.
like human animal rights, not corporate law. I mean, those are
Right.
not the safe. I would have taken an entrepreneurial twist and like more adventurous twist to all of them. So I think he kind of realized that and was just still supportive.
So, in this kind of research, this journey, this quest, how have you felt about your dad as you've delved into all of this research? How has this connected you to him potentially?
I feel like he's just with me all the time.
Yeah,
And I don't want to just say, yes, I feel it, which is a really warm feeling, but I've also gotten
yeah,
evidence. For example, like my computer was broken for a week and a half and it was a huge pain in the ass. It might have even been 2 weeks. Like the place just they just kept like screwing up, fixing it. And I was so
yeah.
annoyed. And I had a medium reading with this medium, Joanne Gerber, and she said, "Oh, your dad just mentioned your computer will be ready soon." She couldn't have known that. I hadn't even
That's
met her at this
crazy.
point. I've since
Wow.
gotten to know her, but she didn't,
Ooh.
she didn't. There's no way she could have known that. She didn't have information on me. And and also, I mean, how would she, of all things, I wasn't posting from my phone, fucking computer's broken. I mean, no one really knew. It was just like, I don't like to like complain about little things. So
Sure.
it just, no one really knew except the people I was working with. And, you know, so, so that was just one example. So I'm like, that was evidence that he's always around me. Cause of course, like, I think anyone could say they feel it because you think about who you care about and you feel
Yeah.
them. So it made me feel more that like he was with me, and that like we wrote my book together. I mean, whatever
Yeah.
people want to think of that, I felt
No, it's
that,
sweet.
and
It's sweet. Honestly,
yeah,
it's really
yeah.
sweet.
Thank
It's,
you.
I think sometimes when we have such a hardcore push towards scientific method, which I support, I'm very into that. Sometimes we forget about the humanity of things, just the feelings, the emotions, which are this is part of who you are with that. But I also wanted to, what is your take or what's been your experience with, I think, paranormal activity and how that plays also into this? There's just so many reports of this throughout the years with people.
I think it ties in. I mean, if you look at
Yeah.
paranormal, it seems to be what I hear the word like paranormal is just like normal stuff physics hasn't explained yet.
Mm,
I mean, like there were apparently years and years ago, people were saying, oh, we saw rocks falling from the sky, and people were like, you are crazy. And then they discovered meteorites and
right.
meteors. And so I think there's a lot of like claimed paranormal is nonsense, and or some of it's people making things up,
Sure.
some of it are people who've been raised very much believing in this and interpret everything that way, and some of it's genuine. Like
Yeah.
if our consciousness is not from our brain and it is downloaded by our brain, which seems to be what the evidence points to, and there's
Right.
these other energies that are able to interact. I mean, I think it explains this. I think it's genuine, and there are parts of this. I think this ties into other dimensions. I mean, string theory talks about other dimensions,
String
and
theory does.
doctors,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and Dr. Stephen Hawking, shortly before he passed, made a video about. And I'm going to completely butcher this, so please, I can send you the
It's
link to the
okay.
video because it's a
Yeah.
little hard to find. But essentially, that there are shadow people reflecting from other dimensions that are he refers to as brains,
Hmm.
BRANE, which is like other dimensions of like beings that are reflecting here. And I mean, this is Stephen Hawking, so
Right. Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think, and then also like our energy, or for lack of a better word, and it's an overused word, but like consciousness,
Hmm.
ability to influence matter, I think seems to be part of it, because I bent a spoon once, which was amazing
Yeah.
and pretty inexplicable. And so, yeah, I think there's probably a lot of the paranormal claims and a lot of nonsense.
I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. That there is a lot of hoaxes and non genuine things, but that should not take away from the fact that there are several real incidences and things that are legitimate. But you can say that almost about a lot of things that people are like, oh, they're doing it for money and they're doing this and that, they're making things
Right.
up. And it can be somewhat difficult to decipher in today's world where a lot of things can be altered online, things of that nature. But it doesn't mean that there's not genuine experiences that people are having, which then makes it even more incredible, that
Right.
there are other things happening that are very difficult to explain and
Mm-hmm.
understand. I think that's what
Right.
makes that incredible with that. And I think there's so much work about consciousness right now. It's a hot thing. It's a big topic. And the
It
hard
is.
problem of consciousness, and I've seen very hardcore super science. I'm talking super science people who are like the gears are changing in their mind right now of the
Mm.
very hardcore neuron synapses whole thing, and they're like, wait a minute, maybe there's a different explanation, and it's usually one that's very difficult to swallow for a lot of
Mhm.
scientists. But it's okay. That's just science, finding different answers. There could be different answers that just maybe haven't aligned with your lifelong experience. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way there couldn't. We see such an experience, such a tiny, tiny spectrum. I mean, if you look at the vastness of not just, I mean, let alone our galaxy or even
Yeah.
our solar system, you go into the universe,
Whew.
the whole possible multiverse, and then this tiny slice of time out of, basically eternal time, pre Big
Yeah.
Bang, pre Big Crunch, let alone even just the human era. Like I don't remember how long humans have been on the earth, but or how many years after the
Sure.
dinosaurs. I forget the exact amount, but I mean, even the dinosaurs, when you start to look at it that way, weren't here that long ago. And we get this tiny. So those are just two ways. Then perception, we don't see infrared or ultraviolet. We don't
Right.
hear
Right.
sounds, waves that dogs hear. And there's probably a spectrum that goes significantly beyond what we can even measure with technology, significantly beyond infrared and ultraviolet. Maybe there are different kinds of sensory input that our physical bodies don't interpret, and then our
Yeah.
brain creates a lot of reality. I mean, was it we see things upside down and our brain flips it so we see it right side up, like the way our eyes work, and then we
Sure.
don't see the center of things and our brain fills that in. And that's like, I believe a lot of stage magicians understand the neuroscience of
Right.
all this, and then they're
Yeah.
able to work with that to create illusions. So I mean, that's just so fascinating to say, when you take that all together, that we perceive complete reality, we perceive almost nothing. And I love that. I mean, that's just is so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think of my dog, who is so awesome, and
Mhm.
his ability to smell is so much greater than my own ability to smell. And a bee's reality is so greatly different than my reality. How is my
Mhm.
reality the right reality, or the only reality? I think it's just a lot of ego to believe that completely for that. And I think sometimes that's why, like, you have to challenge your ego. You have to be willing to step out and go, okay, well, what is the distinct possibility through all this information that it is not that consciousness is in your brain, but is that your brain is a receiver of the consciousness out there. And it's okay if that's true. Like, and I don't,
Mhm.
that's what I don't understand, is maybe the resistance to something being like that. It doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden a very spiritual person or whatever like that. I think that's sometimes what scientists struggle with. So it doesn't mean that that's what you become. But if you're truly a scientist, you should be okay with the other option being actually the option. And because it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden you have to abandon everything that you
Mhm.
like and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I get scared of, I mean, I want this to be true so badly. I don't want to lie to myself. And I do think there are
Sure.
people, like I once had someone who believed in God, and
Hmm.
respectfully, I asked them why. And they said, well, doesn't it feel better to believe than to not? I'm like, well, yeah, but that feeling like I'm lying to myself doesn't feel better. I mean, that would just be sort of a tricking myself. Or, I mean, it feels better if I believe I have $1 billion in my bank account right now. Like, that would
Yeah,
feel really good to believe that. But what happens
sure.
if I start living that way? I might not make the best life. I'd probably
Yeah.
end up in a lot of trouble really fast. So,
Well,
I
no
mean,
one could prove that existence. I mean, if you ask me, I can't prove that. I have
that God
no,
exists. Yeah.
no. I don't. That's the
I don't know.
wrong. That's the wrong
Mhm.
defense, or the wrong thing in a conversation between an atheist and a believer in God. Is, oh, prove it to me. Like, well, neither people can prove one way or the other. But you can't prove that it makes me feel better, or like that. It's bad for me to feel better about something. Like, if someone has a great experience with it, I always, okay, great. That's your
Yeah.
life. Enjoy that.
Yeah.
Like, having these discussions about whether this is real or not, in the end, you're all going to be living a life. Everybody's living their life in all these different ways, and fighting so hard against one side or the other. What's it going to matter when you're trying to, like, take care of your child? And it's like, if you're doing something and it's giving you a positive experience, not hurting a bunch of other people. The problem is when it becomes this very fundamentalism based, crazy, batshit nut stuff that just kind of just keeps on ringing the bell against it. That's a problem. That's a problem, and that I'm just very against on that. But
I'm
I can't
against
prove
that
it to
too.
you. I mean, I can't prove that. I mean, I'm not going to even try to either. I mean,
Hmm.
that's not my game in life,
Okay.
to, like,
Opposite of
prove that.
me.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to prove that it's true. It's because I can't. I can't do that. Like,
Yeah, I guess
yeah,
I'm not. Yeah. I'm not. Well, I still don't believe there's a God. I mean, I've not that I've just never seen any evidence that
yeah,
would back up a concept of a God, and any of the presentations of gods that have been presented throughout the years, from Zeus to the
sure.
current Judeo-Christian
Yeah.
gods. I mean, just none of it.
Yeah.
I have zero. There's nothing about it that seems even remotely real to me.
Yeah.
But could there be some form of a God that hasn't been presented yet. Like maybe like the, some super high level of consciousness that we can't understand that is conscious in and of itself that helps create things. Maybe.
Yeah.
And or maybe it's someone who's not so brilliant that did create it. Like you get into simulation theory, which
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't think is the best explanation, but I think it's a really interesting explanation.
It's
And
all very
I can't
interesting.
rule
Yeah.
out simulation theory, but maybe we were created by like a type of god in a simulation theory, and they're just as much of an idiot as you and I. You know what I mean?
Well, it's kind of
Like,
like this. Here's another thing that I think, again, see, this is the beauty of conversation, is to have
mm-hmm,
civil conversation and enjoy the
mm-hmm,
conversation with that. It's
right.
kind of like I was talking to someone about like alien life,
Mm-hmm,
right? So this is another
yeah.
hot thing for people, right? And there's
Yeah.
a lot of scientists have a very much of a view that, statistical probability, the Drake equation, that there has to be life out there. It
I
must be
agree with that.
teeming with that, right?
Yeah.
I kind of live, and that's great. I actually think that's a very solid understanding of that for
Mm-hmm,
that. But I also work on kind of a spectrum of possibilities, and
mm-hmm,
that I also know a tremendous amount of scientists who also will say, well, that could be true, but there's also a spectrum where the opposite could be true too. Is that what if this is the only life on that? And I heard someone say to him, well, that seems like a big waste of time. Like, I think it's a big waste of time to you because you don't want it to be true. Like, you want
mm-hmm,
the other side. And my thing is, I'm not trying to prove that this or that. I'm just saying there's a spectrum of possibilities that either side, there could be a legitimate point on both sides. So I can look and go, yeah, I mean, there could be billions of civilizations or dead civilizations, and time things happen. And it could be this is it. Either way, I'm good with it. I mean, it's,
mm-hmm,
it's like,
mm-hmm,
but there's a spectrum of possibilities that I think. Now, there's a lot of people who don't think that. That's okay. That's okay.
mm-hmm,
My whole thing is not to try to like whip people into my point of view or that.
mm-hmm,
That's not my thing. I'm just like, it's a lot of questions, and
mm-hmm.
questions are a big part of science too. And so it's an amazing thing.
And they're fun to talk about. Yeah, that
It's
really
fun to talk about.
is
Yeah.
unfortunate. This is atheists as well as fundamentalist religious people, where they're so, I don't quite understand it. It's like they're so frightened to explore possibilities. I mean, we really at the end of the day don't know. As I've said, I
Right.
can't deny that I've seen and witnessed this level of evidence. That's a fact. Does
Right.
it prove without 100% there's an afterlife? No. Physics could
No.
come up with an answer. Again, we could be living in a simulation theory, and this could be the stuff I'm shown. I think that's highly unlikely,
It'd be so
but it's
unbelievable, man.
possible. Yeah.
It's totally
It's
possible. It's
it's
totally
totally
possible,
possible.
right?
To me, that's more possible than the explanation of how things work in the Bible. I would think I would put simulation theory, I would put like the way things work in the Bible the least likely of all the
But you're
things.
willing to
For
have the conversation
Mhm.
about it and not
Yeah.
be like
Yeah.
crazy about it. I just don't like when people get crazy about stuff. I'm like, dude, I can approach things from a scientific lens is just as much. I'm very into it. It's like there's a spectrum of possibilities. And I just think like it's good to just explore. Why can't we just explore? Like that's one of the most beautiful things about being human is exploration. Whether it's exploring a mountain, exploring, you know,
Mhm.
uh, how atoms work. It doesn't really matter. Like that's a hugely big part of being human. So why would I shut that off of myself? Like,
I agree completely. And I also think like how the universe was created, how consciousness works, these are the biggest questions in the
these are
world.
big
So I
questions.
don't really understand why there are certain groups of people who decide to dislike people or think they're horrible who don't
Yes,
agree with this
yes,
assessment. I'm like, this is a really complex assessment.
it's
Why would you
complex.
not want to socialize with someone who has jumped to a different conclusion?
Yeah,
I mean, there are other issues with that, like where you bring in what we were talking about with shiny, happy people. Like, if you think I'm
sure,
less of a
sure.
human because I'm a woman or because I don't think
Yeah,
there's a God or because I was raised Jewish or you think my friends
right.
don't have a right to adopt children and get marry each other, like
That's just crazy stuff. I mean,
that's
that's
Europe.
that's that's
Yeah.
insane. That's just
Yeah.
insane. That's just like
Yeah.
ridiculous. But like
Yeah.
think about the James Webb Telescope. Okay, I
Hmm.
love the James Webb Telescope, like the
Oh my God.
concept of
Yes.
it, and where it's stationed, and think about what we just found out from that. Scientists postulate that, hey, if we see 13 billion years back, that these should be like immature galaxies that we're finding. What do we just find? Extremely mature galaxies in a time and space that they should not have existed. That alone is mind blowing, right? That changes what we think about that time, right? It's exploration. It's a different point of view. It's fine, you know.
It's yeah, that is so mind blowing. I think about that all the time, that we're seeing so far into the past. I mean, someone could be with slightly more advanced technology who's nearby and able to see sooner. They could be looking at all the dinosaurs on our planet right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
and they could be looking at them getting extinct. They could be looking at a human species also maybe billions of years before us,
Yeah.
watching us destroy the planet the way unfortunately we kind of are some now. Like, you just don't
Right.
know. And the planets we could be looking at, there could be, since it's billions of years ago, there could be a human species just like us right now,
Exactly.
or maybe a little bit
Exactly.
different, maybe even dealing with some of the same stuff. Maybe they're there worried about climate change. Maybe they're there, like, just maybe a little behind us, just discovered the internet, or 100 years ahead. I mean, it's just so fascinating what we're not even like. It's just such a insight into the complexity of time and distance
Yes.
and
Yes.
everything.
I
Yeah,
literally
I
just had this conversation with a friend of mine. I was like, yeah, but what if like another alien civilization was just a human civilization? And I was like, what? I was like, well, that's a possibility. I was
it's a
like, it's
total
because we just
possibility.
assume it's going to be a certain shape, a certain type of alien, and this type of thing, because that's what we make up in our mind as like the green
Mhm.
man and the grays and stuff. But what if it wasn't? What if it was just Jim somewhere else? You know, it's like you're like, wow, you landed. You're like, would it be disappointing? I don't think so. I think it'd be
I don't
like
think so either.
amazing. Like it's okay, you know.
I think it's highly, highly likely, because when they look at Goldilocks planets, there's tons of other Earths. I don't see why there aren't other planets in other galaxies, other solar systems with similar planets to Earth that easily could have evolved humans and dogs, and maybe we're a little different. And I'm sure culturally we probably speak very different languages, just
Yeah,
like we speak different languages on this planet. I'm sure it's a completely different language, but could easily be humans, just like we could move to another
yeah,
culture and learn the language and adapt. And yeah, I would think it's more likely that there are other humans and dogs and horses on other planets than not.
yeah. See, and that's what I think is interesting to at least get out there and have those conversations. My only issue is when I think, like I said before, is when there's just no acknowledgement that there are other options. And that's when I think it hurts humanity in general when people just limit the options for that. Oh, consciousness just in the mind. Like, okay, listen, that's one option. It's like
Mhm.
and a variety of options we're exploring. Like, don't cut yourself off. But I do think it's a lot of that also happens, Liz, I think too, is because it's just humans love to be right about stuff like this. I have to prove that I'm right. This is a failure of my life's work if this is not right. And it's like, oh, you're just being open minded. Like
Right.
you're not a failure. Like you're just being
Right.
open minded. I just want people to understand you're not a failure if your life's work becomes something else. Just that's life, man. You know, you ever did something when you're 20 and you're 40, you're like, oh, I didn't see myself doing this. That happens. Like,
Mhm.
like this is pretty common.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. People all the time, and then you talk to someone 60 and they're like, I mean,
yeah,
especially if you let life kind of unfold, there's a lot of surprises to
a
it. And
lot of surprises, like a
yeah.
lot. I mean, I'm 45 and I look at
Mhm.
my 22-year-old self. I'm like, oh, I've lived two lifetimes within the same lifetime. And, you know, by the time I'm
Yeah.
60 something, that could be the same thing I'm thinking about the person I am now. It's okay. It's how it works. You're here for a literal blink in the cosmos, a blink. Not even that,
Right.
probably. It's like,
Right. Right.
it's okay. I mean, there's different possibilities,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's actually a theory that you are eternally living this life again and again. I believe it's called like the block universe, where like each
Mm,
moment is just eternally, and you actually are just
interesting.
eternally living this life, the same life. You know. So,
Yeah. Well,
who
it'd
knows?
be interesting. Like again, these are fun conversations because, like,
Mhm.
if you look at kind of multiple universe, string theory, all this stuff. Like I always think about it like, well, what would I do if actually it was possible for me to meet another version of myself and another I just think that's kind of freaky. It's
Would
kind
you
of like
would you do it? Would you do it?
actually, I actually told someone I initially I said no, I probably wouldn't. But then I don't want to be that conclusive about it. I mean, like, well, maybe let me think about it type of thing. How about you?
Oh, 100%. I would do it. But,
Yeah.
it could be so many ways. Like, it could be they're very similar to you, or there are things you could look back on and be like, oh, if this thing hadn't happened in my life, like this other part of my life would be so much better. But
Yeah.
maybe you'd meet that person and you were wrong in assessing that. Like, maybe it was still certain things would have just turned out the same. I think you learned so much about
Yeah.
yourself and like what helped you in life, what hurt you, what wasn't good
Right.
for you, what was. You get such an insight.
Man, this is like the best stuff. And honestly, I have no clue what it's going to be like when I talk to people. And I like that, actually. I enjoy the surprise of people. And this has been as good and better than I thought it was going to be.
Oh,
Seriously, Liz,
wonderful.
I'm very
Aw.
supportive of your work and your research, your exploration, and I wish you the best as you keep diving down the rabbit hole of this. And I would love to stay in touch to hear over time how this continues to affect you and your findings for it. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh my god, thank you. I had the best time speaking with you too. I feel like I almost forgot I was on a podcast. I feel like you
I
and I could
know,
just sit
right?
and talk for hours.
That's what it's supposed to be. Podcasts should be just
Yes.
fun and talking and
Yes.
not be like, so tell me about your story. And stuff. It's
Yes,
like,
right. Let me go down the list of questions. I have,
I'm okay. Feed me the next line. It's like
Yes.
it's just two
Right.
people talking, and it's actually been
Mhm.
very rewarding to have this conversation. So please tell everyone how they could connect with you and in your podcast and your work and everything you're talking about.
So you can go to my website. Everything is there, wtfjusthappened.net. You can also from there link to buy my book on Amazon. You can listen to my podcast, also WTF Just Happened, all about the afterlife, no woo. You can link to all the apps from my website and get a list of the episodes. You can go to any of your podcast apps and find it. And you can always email me. I'm active on social media, especially Instagram, somewhat on TikTok. And you can find all my social media again through my website. And yeah, you can email me. I love to meet people. I love to talk to them. So
It's
reach
great.
out anytime with any questions.
Fantastic. Liz, what a pleasure. This will be out, I think, either early next week or Friday. One of the two. I'll contact you though. I'll message you. But
Great.
this is not the last time we will be chatting. And grateful for the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. It was really fun.